Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Brice Keller from MarijuanaDefenseCouncil.com and Keller Law Office. Today we'll be recording the presentation so that the people that could not come in person can check it out on YouTube. We'd encourage everybody to be thinking about during the presentations what kind of questions they might have. We encourage probing questions and have index cards up here. So if you take an index card, write your question and give it to me before the Q&A. We're going to start with Rob Ryan. Rob Ryan, I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit about his background, but his involvement in the particular groups is with Miami Valley Normal and with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. So without any further ado, Rob Ryan.
Thank you very much, and I'll try to keep it to 20 minutes, and I have my little timer here to keep me on track. I'm not going to talk about Responsible Ohio or the ballot initiatives, but I do recognize some of the things that Ian had said earlier in that one hearing. I remember that quite distinctly because I was there, and I actually helped write that particular bill, and that was very short-lived. But on that particular topic of medical marijuana, they've had a medical marijuana bill in the state legislature for, I think, the last 5 sessions. I think that's the last 10 years, and there was 1 or 2 before that. And Ian is exactly correct. None of them got past a second hearing, and that one was only because it had to by the laws of the Senate at that time. I'm here talking about the re-legalization of marijuana. I like to change everybody's vernacular to say re-legalization rather than legalization because that's more exactly the truth. And if you notice the spelling, that's the correct spelling here in Ohio. And if you really want to know why that is and the historical reasons behind that, I'll be more than willing. Okay? First of all, I'll talk about Ohio Normal, or normal in general, okay? Our mission is very simple, is to re-legalize marijuana for personal, industrial, and therapeutic use. And we use those words very carefully, okay? Who here drinks wine? Oh my God, okay? Every time you drink a glass of wine, do you have a big old party? No, okay? Sometimes it's just to relax. And it's the same way with marijuana, okay? Industrial is quite clear. Every single industrialized country in the world grows hemp, except for the United States, except for little pockets maybe in Kentucky and Colorado, okay? Therapeutic use, we used to say medical use, and in the American phrase and definition of things, medical connotates some sort of prescription. Medical marijuana, whether you like it or not, will never, ever be a prescription medication here in the United States. The FDA doesn't regulate plants. It regulates compounds, okay? So you'll never, ever see a prescription for an herb, all right? Our vision of the future is pretty clear. It's where cannabis, aka marijuana, weed, ganja, whatever you want to call it, there's a whole variety of names, it's kind of interesting in its own right, is free of the black market influences, legally grown, bought, traded in a properly labeled and regulated market. And we added this several years ago before Responsible Ohio even came on to the scene and included that last phrase in growing for personal use. Okay, I think that was a big step forward. Okay, I'm just going to give you a little bit of overview on a couple things: cannabis, marijuana, hemp, some utilities, a little bit of historic sense, a little bit of the law and the evolution, a little bit of the sordid history of medical marijuana here, Ohio law, and especially what are you going to do? Because this is really empowers you, okay? Because you're going to be going to the ballot in November to say, keep prohibition, or legalize marijuana? And my sense is no, yes. So what's hemp? Okay? I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the bottom line is hemp is cannabis sativa. Okay? People try to differentiate what hemp is versus marijuana. In reality, it's the differences between a white rose and a red rose. Okay? One has a little bit more of content. One is grown a little bit differently than the other. In a hemp field, you have males and females grown together. Okay? They don't kill the males like they do in the, quote, psychoactive personal ingestion mode. Okay? So that is a huge difference. And you never want to grow, consumable marijuana in the middle of a hemp field. You'll just come out with very poor pot. Sorry. And there's, okay, you're right. But the bottom line is hemp is cannabis sativa. Okay? That's undisputable. It's grown in every single industrialized country in the world except for the United States. It has a rich history, not only here in the United States, but all throughout the world. I lost my little timer here. Okay. Brice will keep me on track here. First, there's a number of little factoids there about the identified paper in the early Chinese dynasties, draft of the Declaration of Independence, Columbus sails. A little funny thing about the shipping industry. I was in Maryland, and they were retrofitting one of the earlier ships, and they made great pains to make it historically accurate, except for one single aspect. And that was all the sails and the ropes. Because at that point in time, the vestiges of reefer madness were still alive and well. And they didn't want any hemp on this historic ship. There's been American flags made of hemp. And as a matter of fact, just a few days ago, there was one flown over the Capitol building made of hemp by the Colorado. Oh, all right, very good. Someone knows this is current history. All right. Gutenberg Bible, so on and so forth. It's the oldest cultivated plant and it was actually grown in World War II, and they produced a video called Hemp for Victory. And those plants still live on today in the backwoods of Minnesota and Kentucky because they supplied thousands of pounds of marijuana hemp seeds, cannabis seeds, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but hemp is part of our history. There's a whole sorts of use of cannabis in an industry. You can make plastics from it. As a matter of fact, you can make injection molded plastics. It has a great biodegradable sense, and it's kind of funny because in the American cars, they have a federal law that says you got to have a certain amount of biodegradable content in the American cars. Okay? And so what happens is they grow hemp out in Canada, press it into panels, and ship it into Detroit for American cars. Okay? European car makers are using it much more readily, and you can see, I think that's a Lotus down there at the bottom right. Okay, so it's alive and well in the rest of the world. Canada use the major food use of marijuana in, let me back up. Canada is now the leader in the global hemp food. You go to your various health food stores or even Kroger's, okay? They sell hemp seed, and it all comes, shelled hemp seed. It's very good on your salad, by the way. That all comes from Canada, okay? And there's a whole variety of products pictured there. Those are bought from a variety of stores in the greater Cincinnati area, okay? But cannabis is food. There's no doubt about it. Now let's get into the short history of the law. Before 1937, cannabis was a legal entity here in the Cincinnati Lloyd Library. There's a rich source of cannabis-based medicines that they studied and they implemented. They had whole sorts of uses for cannabis in the medical field. But in 1937, they outlawed it in a catch-22 law. You had to have the stamp in order to have the marijuana. You had to have the marijuana in order to have the stamp. And you get arrested in the process, okay, because you just couldn't comply with the law, okay? And through the 40s and 50s, there's all sorts of scare tactics. I put a couple of the posters up there. The one on the top right is fascinating. They show injecting marijuana. You can't do it. You can't do it. It's not water soluble, okay? It's just physically impossible. But in the late 60s, that Marijuana Tax Stamp Act was challenged, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it was ruled unconstitutional. And so out of that case was born the Controlled Substance Act, which we live with today, okay? And at the time, you know, they're trying to be very scientific, and they made 3 different categories, or 3 different facets. They said it's safety of use, it's medical utility, and it's addictive quality, okay? So they classified, you know, cocaine and the rest of the drugs. Cocaine is actually a legal drug. It's Schedule II. Coca-Cola imports hundreds of metric tons of coca leaf into New Jersey every year. Okay? It's Schedule II, so it's legal. Okay? But they couldn't decide on marijuana because it just didn't fit the various categories. So they went up to the White House and said, what do we do? Okay, President Nixon, this is an interesting soundbite, and it went for decades on, is that let's put it into the most dangerous category as Schedule I as a message to the children. And that particular soundbite lived on for years. At the time, there was no proof of its deadly characteristics, its addictive qualities, and a lack of medical utility. It was actually back in 1937, the American Medical Association guy opposed marijuana being included. They called it cannabis at that time, and they on the Congress floor, they said something like, it's that Mexican narcotic, marijuana. And that's how we got the spelling today, because of the Mexicans. We didn't like them. But basically, all these laws are based on fear-mongering. And here's just a couple examples of what we have. Some historical propaganda, reefer madness, and marijuana. You know, you inject it, and the devil's harvest. You know, I was a young man at one time, and, you know, like any young man interested in women, and I never had that experience where women just went wild and with great abandon. And I was like, what happened to that marijuana? But anyway, today's propaganda is all sorts of things. Smoked marijuana isn't medicine. It will damage your chromosomes. That's 400 more times potent than Woodstock. You know what the facts are on that? They know how to store it nowadays, rather back in the 60s, where they didn't store it very well and it degraded, and by the time it got to the lab, it was very much less than what it started out to be. You know, they had Acapulco Gold back then. Okay? Schizophrenia is a charged one that pops its head up every once in a while. And the fact of the matter is, if you have some sort of predisposition to schizophrenia, it's questionable whether or not you should smoke or not. Okay? 400 times worse than cigarette smoking. The largest lung study ever conducted by Dr. Tashkins included marijuana. Okay? And out of that study, it just regurgitated the facts that smoking cigarettes is bad for you. You know, all sorts of different conditions, cancers, etc. Okay? They didn't find anything with the marijuana. They couldn't really discern any kind of negative effects. But what's most interesting out of that study, okay, was the fact that there was some combined smokers. The people who smoked tobacco and marijuana. And they actually showed a statistical drop in their conditions that are related directly to tobacco. They're not quite sure, but the theory goes something like this, in that nicotine or tobacco is an inflammatory, whereas marijuana is an anti-inflammatory. That's why it's good for pain relief, okay? And so the theory is that, you know, cancer is usually in some sort of inflamed condition, lots of cells growing, dying, and more multiplications, whereas marijuana actually lets those cells decompose and be less inflamed. So that's a theory that's still in progress. Okay? Man boobs. Oh my God. and there's one in there about testosterone and you don't have any children or something. And I think, who's that guy? Bob Marley? All right? How many children did he have? I think 14? Legitimate? And some others? And other ways? So anyway, these laws are still based on ignorance. Talking about the law. The Ohio and the United States government classify marijuana, I spelled it wrong there, it should be an H, okay, because that's the way it's spelled in Ohio and in the United States Federal Code. It's a Schedule I drug. And in layman's language, it's because it's deadly, addictive, and with no medical use. And the exact definition is below. The drug or substance has a high potential for abuse, i.e., it's addictive. The drug or substance has no currently accepted medical use in the treatment of the United States. How many states do we have that's medical marijuana? 23? 23? And there's I love this last one, because when I interact with some of our antis, like Kevin Sabat, okay, he always leaves out the third one, okay? He says it's because it's addictive and it has no medical use. And nearby I challenged him on that subject, and I said, no, there's 3 reasons, okay? And the last one is, there is a lack of accepted safety for use of drug or substance under medical supervision. In other words, it's so dangerous that even a trained medical professional can't use it. It says deadly to me. And that's where I come up with taking those 3 definitions and translate it into the common man's vernacular: deadly, addictive, and no medical use. Which one of those is true? None. So, let's get into the history, I call it the sordid history of medical marijuana. I talked about the Controlled Substance Act, okay, and I talked a little earlier about this problem that it didn't fit the definition, and Nixon solved that dilemma and put it into the same schedule with heroin. Well, out of that, the Congress rebelled. They said, that's bunk. And they commissioned the Marijuana Commission. the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse, and it was chaired by a conservative government. Give me a little 5 minutes, 2 minutes? 2 minutes, all right, I'll be quick, okay? And he essentially concluded a fairly lengthy study, and he came out with a report that's good reading to today, and it's called The Marijuana, A Signal of Misunderstanding. Nixon ignored the report. I think he was more engaged in Watergate at the time. Quickly going through, in the 80s, there was first cases of AIDS was recorded. Some heavy-duty drugs were developed. Patients discovered that they could use marijuana to overcome some of the effects of the heavy-duty drugs. They had a compassionate investigational new drug program where they were supplied marijuana. But it became so popular, all right, that Bush shut it down. And they still have to today, because of a lawsuit they won, there's just a few patients remaining that gets a tin of 300 cigarettes of marijuana a month supplied by the federal government. It's kind of interesting. The federal government says it's a Schedule I drug. You can't use it, but they supply it every month. I don't know. And here in Ohio, okay, it happened as well. In 1996, there were 3 states that passed medical marijuana laws. Everyone knows the first. It was California. Not everyone knows the second one. It was Arizona. And it's interesting, the father of the American conservative movement, Barry Goldwater, okay, was honorary chairman. Here in Ohio, it was actually put into a law, okay, passed by the legislature. But Governor Voinovich in the next year, 1997, made that a priority bill where Senator Blessing from my area of Ohio, down in Cincinnati, made that a high priority bill to overturn that. In the meantime, a bunch of doctors were being threatened by the Clinton administration, okay, that you would lose their licenses, they would lose all sorts of privileges if they even discussed this with their patients. Dr. Marcus Conant and the rest of the doctors sued the federal government and won. It basically said that doctors have the right of free speech and they can discuss anything they wish with their patients, okay? And again, you know, there's another report as far as the Institute of Medicine, okay? Just an indication of the polls, okay? Throughout the 60s and 70s, it kind of wandered around, you know, depending on the president who was in. But in 1989, 1990, it took a very distinct pivot turn. It went one direction and one direction only. And my theory on that is that it had the internet came into people's homes, and now information became much more available, okay? And I'm going to conclude, go through here. I already talked about the Governor Voinovich, and a little plug for Miami Valley Normal. One of our members here collected the most signatures for the volunteers. Thank you very much, Michelle. So, what can you do? Okay, one, I'd be remiss to say, if I didn't mention, Miami Valley Normal has a meeting next Saturday in Dayton. Start a conversation with your legislators, your older family, and ask marijuana questions at the upcoming candidates. All your local guys are going to be up for an election. Okay? So I just left you with some sample questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, next up we're going to have Ian James again talking about the overall perspectives from the Responsible Ohio campaign.
Oh, I've got to get a new picture. That's horrible. Hey, everybody. Sorry, I know that most of you just heard what I said earlier, so I'll try not to repeat too much of it. Although I know we're being recorded for the process. I'm Ian James. I'm the executive director of Responsible Ohio. And Responsible Ohio started, it was really kind of grew from an idea that I had about almost a year and a half ago, or a little bit more than that ago. I thought about what was going on around the state, around the country, and I saw there were 23 other states that had medical marijuana. And I realized that inevitably it was going to come to Ohio. And the way to make sure that we had a system for legalization that worked, in my view, was to make sure that we had regulation. If you were at the luncheon, you heard me talk about regulation a lot. Well, let me tell you why I talk about it a lot. It's because Ohioans, voters, and that's who we're talking to, right? In order to get this change in the Constitution, we have to go to voters. We have to talk to the Ohio voters and convince them that this change is being done for the right reasons, and the change that's going to occur when they vote yes brings about X, Y, or Z. If they don't believe that that's going to happen, or they don't believe the premise that it's inevitable, or that it's necessary, or that there are medical marijuana patients that need compassionate care that marijuana provides, or they don't believe that marijuana is currently being sold today in Dayton, and that you can get marijuana delivered to that door in 15 minutes by emailing, texting, or phoning someone. If they don't believe that those things are going to happen, then there's a chance that they're going to vote no, right? I mean, because they just that's not going to happen, Ian. That people aren't smoking marijuana right now. It's crazy. But I think, as you saw from Rob's presentation, that people are consuming marijuana, Rob, and it's true. And they're consuming marijuana right now in Dayton and across the state. And the marijuana that's being consumed isn't tested, unless you know someone that's growing it in their basement or their backyard or wherever, and then they're taking it to a lab and having it tested and then giving you the lab reports. It's not being tested, not being regulated, and is not being taxed. And so when we see that from, as Rob showed us, the jingoistic and the racist past of marijuana prohibition, the roots of it, it was because you had Mexicans that were consuming marijuana, and you had people that were saying, we don't want that. And you had the black community that was consuming marijuana, and they said, we definitely don't want that either. And then you had white Americans also consuming. They're like, oh my gosh, it's hell on earth. We got to stop this. So we've had this prohibition for decades now, almost 80 years. And as we watched this process go forward, and I looked at not only the history, but what was going on around the country, it became very clear to me that we could take a step that no other state had ever taken, and that was to legalize the medicinal use and the personal use of marijuana, and we could do it in one ballot. That's because we have the right to an initiative petition in the state of Ohio. It was a process that was given to the voters. The voters actually demanded the right as part of the progressive era, where we said, you know what, the State House is a cesspool. That's what, back in the late 19th century, early 20th century, there was a lot of corruption. There were people giving away things for votes, getting things for votes. It was just a corrupt cesspool. And to clean up the process and to return democracy back to the people, which is really where the power all lies of government, right? It's the democracy. All power rests with the people, and it flows to the government, not the other way around. The people said, we're going to have the right to initiative petition. We're going to put these issues on the ballot. We're going to make sure that when we do it, those issues are going to have the full weight of law, or they're going to have the full weight of the constitutional amendment of law, right? So we took the path of the constitutional amendment because, frankly, we didn't trust the State House. We could have done a simple law change, but then we were pretty sure that, as we've seen here recently, they might come back and attack that. So we've been circulating up until last week petitions and gathered about 700,000 signatures. And when we turn those in, those will be checked at the boards of elections, and this November we'll be able to vote for the first time on marijuana legalization. What does it do? Well, it will provide for medical marijuana patients to go to their doctor, their licensed primary treating physician, and get a recommendation. It's not you can't get a prescription because that's federally protected word and process. But you get, just like you can in other states that are medical marijuana states, you can get a recommendation from your doctor. And then you go to the Marijuana Control Commission that's set up just like we do with the alcohol, with the Division of Liquor Control, and you get your permit, and then you go to your medical marijuana dispensary system that's set up through the process of the amendment to dispense medical marijuana. And folks that are really concerned about medical marijuana say to me, well, how do I know that there's going to be medical marijuana available? What about these strains with the CBDs that deal with this issue or that issue, or the THC level is going to be at this level or that level? How do we know that the growers are actually going to grow this marijuana? What's the guarantee? It's in the amendment. If the growers don't grow what is demanded, and the demand is not only on the personal use, like I want something that's high THC, right? I don't care about the CBDs, I want the high THC. That's one side. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is the medical marijuana, the CBDs, and the other strains that people need for medicine, for medicinal use. That demand, if it's not met in the first 4 years, the state of Ohio adds licenses until that demand is met. Now, some folks said, well, why don't you just do it like right at the beginning? As we discussed at lunch, you can see what happened in these other states that threw open the doors, Colorado, and have 1,000+ licenses. You have market collapse and you have price collapse. Price collapse is good for consumers short term, but not always good on the long term. And it's certainly impossible if you're a state regulator regulating it. But you look at what some of these other states, as Adam provided the other day, there's a graphic, an infograph, that shows that of the 23 states that allow medical marijuana licenses, 10 of them, we would be the 11th, allow 10 or fewer licenses. 10 or fewer. The other, I don't have the image here in front of me. Actually, I think I do. Allow up to 23. And then you have Colorado and Washington State and Oregon with much more than that. So we make sure that we are dealing with the medical marijuana patients and ensuring that they will always be able to get the strain that they need because it's built in. And the same is true with the personal use side of things. So if you're saying, I want this marijuana and I can't buy it, the store is out, then the state is tracking that, and that's something that some other folks get upset about, like the state's tracking sales of marijuana. Well, yeah, of course they are. Just like they're tracking the sale of booze, right? It's part of the process. If you want to have legalization, folks, you got to have a process that regulates it. You have to have what we like to call metrics, and you got to stick to them. But in doing that, you got the ability to have what you want, which is legalization. But that comes with responsibilities. Can't consume marijuana in public, just like you can't walk down the street with a bottle of Jack Daniels and drink a bottle of Jack Daniels walking down the street. I mean, people do it, but it's illegal. You can't consume marijuana in a car. You can't consume marijuana on a train. You can't consume marijuana in a plane. As Chris Stock reminds me, that's like Dr. Seuss. He's mad now because I just took his line. Yeah, now I saw you. So you can't consume marijuana in public. And why is that? Some people say, well, I should be able to consume marijuana wherever I want. Guess what? The voters, again, this is about the voters, don't want that. They reject it. They want you to be able to purchase marijuana in a regulated licensed store, to be able to enjoy marijuana at your house. And if that's not to your liking, go to a friend's house. But can't consume in a park, can't consume in a school, can't consume in a prison. You know, not that people don't do it, but you can't. Right? So there's that structure for that. And then if you don't want to buy marijuana from a retail store and you don't want to go to a medical marijuana dispensary, you can grow your own marijuana. You can grow 4 flowering plants under this amendment. 4 flowering plants. You can have as many vegetative plants as you want. We have 4 flowering plants, and you can maintain 8 ounces of marijuana in your house. You can't sell that marijuana. You can't trade that marijuana. You can't barter with that marijuana. Hey, Brice, I want to borrow your car. Here's an ounce of marijuana. You can't do that. But I can gift it. I can give it like, Brice, here's an ounce of marijuana. Go forth and do good. Because he's over 21. I'm over 21. The other stipulation that we put in the amendment is that if you are going to grow marijuana at home, you need to make sure it's secure away from people that are under 21. You know, a big issue for voters is, okay, we're fine with you growing at home. We're fine with you home brewing. We don't want your kids, if you got kids, or the neighbor kids to come over and start picking buds off of your plant and then going to get high, you know, while their mom's at work. It's summer and we know how kids are. So if you want to grow marijuana at home, you have to secure it away from people that are under 21. So what does that mean? Think if you've got a greenhouse out back and you want to grow marijuana in that greenhouse, you've got to lock that up. You've got to make sure that people that are under 21 can't get to it. Because it needs to be secure and kept away from folks under 21. Let's step back for a second. Say you want to own and operate your own retail marijuana store. You want to set up shop in your neighborhood. We follow the alcohol post-prohibition process called a local option, where if you want to open up your store, you have to go to that precinct. There's less than about 1,000 voters. You have to go to that precinct voters, and you have to put yourself on the ballot. You take a petition out, just the same way they do it. If you're an Italian restaurant, you want to have Sunday wine, and your precinct is dry. You have to go put yourself on the ballot, and you have to allow the voters of that precinct, that community, to opt in or green up that precinct. Some people don't want to do that because they're like, why do I have to ask permission? Look at other states. You know, Colorado did it. You know, people say, well, let's do what Colorado did. Colorado said, hey, if your county doesn't want to allow you to open and operate a dispensary, grow operation, whatever, they can block you. And a city can say, we're going to zone you out. We're going to make it so you can't operate in the retail center of town. You have to go into a light industrial or a heavy industrial area. Well, guess what? There's a reason that the market forces of that, you know, forcing people to go where it's uncomfortable. They don't feel safe. They don't feel comfortable. They don't feel welcome. When you have folks that are ready to spend money, going to places that they don't feel comfortable, welcome, or safe, there's a chance that they probably won't go. So, or if they go, they're not going to stay long, and they're, you know, very uncomfortable. So we said, let's make sure that we're giving the voters of that precinct the opportunity to decide whether or not that store owner can open. And then you're a good neighbor, just like any convenience store or bar or restaurant or grocery store that has a liquor store or sells beer. You're a good neighbor. Everything's hunky-dory. Let's say you don't want to have a retail store. You want to have a testing facility. You have the right to do that too under this amendment. You have the right to own and operate your own store. You have the right to own and operate your own testing facility. You have the right to own and operate your own manufacturing facility. You want to make cookies or something edible, or you want drinks or lotions or potions or elixirs, you can do that too. And the same thing goes for the medical marijuana dispensary system. So the amendment is put together in a way that really looks at what's happened around the country, what worked, what didn't work, and put it together in a way that works for Ohio and is expandable enough to deal with the real market forces of the consumer, because people are consuming today. People are going to consume tomorrow, and people are going to consume decades down the road. And as our state grows, and as consumers say, you know what, I want something different, the state has the ability to say, okay, here's how we're dealing with that. And do it in a way that's responsible, regulated, requires testing, requires taxation. Brice is standing up again, which means my time is up. Thanks.
Okay, next we have Mr. Chris Stock he was the principal drafter of the marijuana legalization amendment from the State and High Group and Responsible Ohio. He's going to tell you a little bit about the functionality of the language and go through exactly how the amendment will work.
Thanks, Brice. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Stock. I think I'm fine with the picture. I've gone gray since that picture was taken, so I'm going to ride that horse as long as I can. Right, that's right. Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you guys in a lovely Dayton Law School. Brice, you and your colleagues were spoiled to be here. I went to school at Ohio State, and there is nothing at Ohio State that was even remotely as nice as this. So this is a beautiful facility to have a symposium, so I appreciate that. I had an opportunity to listen to Ian, and I have had many opportunities to listen to Ian. Normally, Ian and I complement one another well. Ian talks about some things, and I talk about other things as we make presentations. But it turns out that Ian decided to steal my thunder and take everything that I normally talk about as his own. So on the fly, that's the kind of guy Ian is, right? On the fly, I will, I think about this as an analogy to the Gospels, right? There are 4 different Gospels telling the same story, but telling them in slightly different ways. So I'll jump from one to a different Gospel and try to provide you with some thoughts about the amendment and legalization in Ohio that Ian hasn't had an opportunity to talk about. The first set of things that I want to focus on that I don't think I heard from Ian are some of the economic numbers. Ian spent a lot of time talking about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 facilities and the testing facilities and all the opportunities up and down the stream of commerce. And I know that there will be many questions at some point in the day surrounding Tier 1, and Tier 1 is the grow facilities, and I have seen them characterized in the media repeatedly, and I'm sure all of you have, as various forms of a monopoly or a cartel and so on and so forth. And I always chuckle to myself that the grow facilities are characterized as such because no one has seen yet the business model for how these grow facilities will work. I think on the front end, folks were anticipating something about the grow facilities that just isn't the case, and you've seen that narrative sort of take hold. And it has taken incredible message discipline from the folks at Responsible Ohio not to explain to the general public how Tier 1 will work in actuality. And there's a reason for that. We received a tip early on that the General Assembly was going to do everything possible to come after Responsible Ohio and to come after this amendment. They would do everything in their power to shut it down. And so we took a calculated risk that not sharing the full business model with respect to Tier 1 would not give the General Assembly an opportunity to triangulate as to how best to shut us down. And you've seen, I think you're starting to see the fruits of that. I mean, everyone here, I assume, knows about House Joint Resolution 4. That was passed out of the Senate last week. And they target Responsible Ohio as a monopoly, oligopoly, or cartel. And I think that come mid-August, when everyone's given the opportunity to just sort of see how the Tier 1 business structure actually works, as opposed to how people seem to characterize it, the General Assembly and opponents of Responsible Ohio will say, man, we got that wrong. So, not to sort of tease the issue, but I will tease the issue to some extent to suggest that there's a lot more to the story about Tier 1 than any of us have heard yet. And I will say that we look forward to sharing the full story in mid-August after the time has passed for the legislature to make changes to its House Joint Resolution 4. So I'm not attempting to be cloak and dagger with you. I am just suggesting that we all live in interesting times, right? Now, getting back to the amendment, I don't think I heard Ian talk at all about the tax revenue that will be generated from the proposal. We were very deliberate in how we set both the tax structure on the front end and how the tax revenues devolve on the other end. Now, folks that are familiar with the amendment understand that the 3 tiers are taxed at a 15% rate at Tier 1, 15% at Tier 2, and 5% at Tier 3. And there's a reason for that. This wasn't a willy-nilly choice on behalf of the drafters of the amendment. There was a significant amount of economic modeling that went into those numbers. In fact, we and Adam Markovitz, who's here with us today, did yeoman's work on some of that economic modeling, and certainly supported by an economic firm out of Cleveland, and the in-plan economic modeling system that the Marijuana Policies of Ohio Task Force used to run these numbers and verify them. And the economic modeling suggested that based on the consumer demand, number one, as defined by the federal government, BOTEC, and RAND, would be this. And the current price of weed, we used the priceofweed.com website, which maybe some here are familiar with. We used that as a benchmark to make sure that as we went through the modeling and took, an ounce of marijuana from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to Tier 3 and the pricing structure, we wanted to make sure that by the time we got out of Tier 3 at the consumer access point, that the marijuana would be competitively priced as against the black market. Because what folks have to realize is not only are these 10 grow facilities or 1,000 Tier 2 facilities or 1,000 Tier 3 facilities competing with each other all up and down the stream of commerce, they're competing with the black market. So if they set their prices too high as compared to each other, number one, or as compared to the black market, number two, they're going to be out of business. And so the first rule of economics is you assume all economically rational actors, and you follow that modeling. And we were able to say, okay, the optimal curve at which the state makes the most money in terms of tax revenue, as against the net profit outcome for these 3 tiers, appears to be 15, 15, and 5. Now, we could have set that number much higher. We could have followed the Washington model. We could have followed, to some extent, the Colorado model, and said we'll set it at 25 across the board, creating, I think, in the case of Washington, that's a 43%. What's 47? 44% effective tax rate. 15, 15, 5 based on usage, based on sales, would create about a 21% effective tax rate here in Ohio. So we set that number at just the right level to allow for the state to optimize tax revenue and allow for each of the 3 tiers to optimize net profits. It creates sort of an equilibrium at that point. So when I hear suggestions out in the media and others that, oh, this is gonna price out competition, you know, that they will sell this marijuana for prices that are too high and there won't be any competition, and as a result nobody will be able to buy legalized weed. I sort of laugh at that, because that turns, you know, Adam Smith on its head, right? I mean, these folks would all be competing with each other. They couldn't price out as against the black market because they'd lose market share to the black market. Again, assume economic rational actors. So I want to sort of highlight that issue as something to just flag for you guys. And the second piece of that is I want to talk about where this money goes, okay? Now, I mentioned earlier that the Marijuana Policies of Ohio Task Force has done a study. You can find it at mptof, as in Frank.org. I'll give that to you again if you want. You can find this study at mpotf.org, mpotfrank.org. They have done the modeling there to suggest that based on the Responsible Ohio model, you're gonna look at 35,000 jobs created in the sector itself, but also in the ripple effects, the ancillary effects, and that's where the in-plan economic system came in. In-plan looked at the overall industry and made some assumptions about, you know, accounting services, additional legal services, you know, the other ancillary jobs that will come from this sort of ripple effect. And they were able to determine, like I said, 35,000 additional jobs created as a result of this amendment. In-plan is the economic system that's used by the Cleveland Clinic. It's used by Cuyahoga County for various things. It's a system that's widely recognized as you know, sort of the preeminent economic modeling system. So I thought that was an important thing to point out. And the other thing that I think is important to point out is, you know, based on this 15.5 number and the consumer demand numbers that you see from BOTEC and the federal government, et cetera, you're going to find that at stabilization, at market stabilization, call it year 4, call it year 5 if you want, this industry will be throwing off approximately $554 million in tax revenue annually. Again, go to the task force website. You can verify it yourself. They've done an entire economic study to verify it. And we recognized early on that this was going to throw off a tremendous amount of money. And one of the big things we were worried about was this money going straight back to the General Assembly, whose efforts have been and will continue to be to strangle marijuana legalization, and saying, here are the fruits of our labor, now go do whatever it is you do, General Assembly, with the proceeds. We made a very strategic decision to cut them out of the process entirely. And so what you will see in the amendment is a taxing and revenue structure that bypasses the General Assembly, that bypasses Columbus. 85% of that $554 million goes to local government entities and county government entities on a per capita basis. I was just on the phone with Cuyahoga County, so those numbers are fresh in my mind. But on a stabilized basis, what that means for Cuyahoga County is about $22 million for the county, $30 million for the local government entities that make up the county, including the city of Cleveland, for a grand total of $52 million to that county itself. Montgomery County would probably be somewhere around, I don't know, $20 million. Adam, we could ask Adam, and he'd probably pull those numbers up right away. The point is, this is an incredibly significant amount of money for local governments at a time when the General Assembly is cutting the local government fund to balance its budget. I don't know if that's something that this group is aware of, but the state of Ohio has a requirement that it must balance the budget every year. And what the state of Ohio has done year after year, and you will hear our local government officials gnash teeth about it, is to kill the local government fund. So it's balancing its state budget on the backs of the local governments. And what we're saying with this marijuana amendment is no more. We're going to bypass the state General Assembly. We're going to put money back into local government services, and we're going to give them the ability to hire law enforcement, to do economic development projects, infrastructure projects, road and bridge repair. And it's those last two that get me really excited. I know I'm showing my nerd here. We're almost done, okay. But when you talk about infrastructure improvement and you talk about road and bridge repair, those are the kind of things that create virtuous cycles, because every dollar spent on those kind of things will bring back to the community $3.1 in ripple effect spending. So there are a lot of virtuous cycles that are built into the structure, to the architecture of this amendment. And a lot of good can and will come from this. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Brice. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm Brice Keller from Keller Law Office, MarijuanaDefenseCouncil.com. I'm going to try to run through my slides fairly quickly so that we can take a break and then get on to the having you guys ask the questions that you want of the panel. First of all, this fight is a long fight. It will go on for many years beyond the initial stage of getting Responsible Ohio's marijuana legalization amendment through the voter and ballot initiative this year. We have problems with employment issues, with drug driving issues, with legalizing hemp, and this is a long battle. It is a battle about the rights for marijuana users and patients. Keller Law Office is in an interesting position. I'm a public defender contractor, meaning that in three counties I take appointed public counsel positions. I'm a political consultant for the Responsible Ohio campaign. We have MarijuanaDefenseCouncil.com, and this is a place where patients and users today can go get themselves connected to resources. If you find yourself and your kid is in trouble with marijuana, you can get connected with a defense attorney. You can get connected with Human Solution International that deals with the other issues related to being incarcerated and things like that. We have Green Fight, which is an app on iTunes, and we have social media groups that are all working to bring awareness to these issues. Our mugshot campaign. What we're doing is we're putting it in the face of people to say that on this picture we have identified I am a marijuana user, and that is in violation of the law here in Ohio. And I practice law in Ohio. That is my real attorney number. And we have our website on it, and we've established a medical marijuana defense. 22 veterans a day commit suicide, and PTSD is reduced by up to 75% by using marijuana. We want to inbox the mugshot campaign to all the decision makers across the state, because we want them to realize that if they come after Green Fight and say what you're doing is wrong, we're going to come back and say that we have free speech, we have the right to practice law, and we have the right to establish a medical marijuana defense now. If they want to fight us on the issues, marijuana prohibition is an epic failure. It is wrong and it needs to be stopped. Marijuana criminal union. There is no such thing as a criminals union. The best thing we got is the public defender's office that is going to represent the collective. We hope. We hope that the public defender is the top defense attorney that goes against the attorney general as a government agent, but that doesn't necessarily play out. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the law office as a political tool. We establish an organization that represents patients, users, and advocates, and then put ourselves in a position where we can put those issues on the record, identify and catalog every letter and statement to representative officials, and advocate for the collective. And through this process, we'll establish standing to be able to put in amicus briefs and appeals operations, or to be able to get into the Supreme Court. We have an impending possibility of a legal battle. And so we're talking about what we need to do as an activist community to make our voice heard. Okay, we're going to go support the marijuana legalization amendment. We're going to go vote for it. But we're also getting pushback with House Joint Resolution 4, where the state is undermining the ballot process. So we're going to send notices to government officials. We're going to establish a care requirement to defeat executive immunity. And we're going to establish a right or duty to bring that claim. Keller Law Office is a representative of the activist community, okay, through marijuanadefensecouncil.com. And we are a contractor for the Public Defender's Office. So we believe that we have a right to collect the information from the activist community, make an amicus, and support whatever marijuana legal entanglements would come about. We have a belief that we have a right to have our voice heard. Let's talk about civil disobedience. I participate in civil disobedience. Marijuana, simple possession here in Dayton, Ohio, where my address is a minor misdemeanor. That means it's decriminalized. No one can call me a criminal for doing what I'm doing, because I'm doing something that is the minor misdemeanor level. It is a civil violation. And you can have possession, distribution, and cultivation all at the minor misdemeanor levels here in Ohio, save for the places that have enhanced penalties, like in a home rule scenario. Green Fight and marijuanadefensecouncil.com is set up to support activists that are ready to take that offensive fight and say, I smoke marijuana, I'm not going to be ashamed of it, I'm not going to be stigmatized by it, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to say I have the right to civil disobedience, and if you want to come after me, then I am going to get my day in court and challenge the constitutionality of marijuana prohibition, and or challenge my ability to be able to argue to the jury nullification or a medical marijuana defense. Okay, is marijuana prohibition unconstitutional? That's a big question. Is it so wrong that it's unconstitutional as a policy matter? And then the question becomes, when is marijuana legal? Does marijuana become pseudo-legal because it's in a decriminalized state and enforcement should stop, but it hasn't stopped? Where are we at in that process? The federal government has already made the Cole memo that seemingly puts a responsibility on our state legislatures to act in reforming their laws. Does the fact that they haven't in Ohio mean that maybe the law is currently in flux? Who knows? These are complicated questions that we need to address. But when we think about marijuana is illegal and that's the end of the story, it's not. There are so many more dynamics. When you have the top cop in the United States, the President of the United States, has said that he thinks marijuana is safer than alcohol. He's got the pardon power. Is it legal or not? It is a question. Okay, let's go to your packets. You should find the activist mission number 1. This is where you're going to get connected. We're going to get connected for a 10-year, 20-year, whatever it takes, battle to get marijuana and hemp legalized, to bring the mission of NORML and LEAP and the other activist groups to the forefront and say, we're about marijuana patients and users' rights. So on the Green Fight Activist Mission #1, you'll see a connection to my Facebook page, the Green Fight Facebook page, the Responsible Ohio page, ohio2015.com, which is a page that has news and information about the marijuana legalization efforts. We intend that will probably be a larger traffic page coming in the future. ResponsibleOhio.com. Go there, get on the list, sign up to be able to have Responsible Ohio campaign give you the business opportunity information as soon as it's available. We have, it's a 4-part thing. Connect to all our activist feeds at Green Fight, Ohio 2015, and Responsible Ohio. Tune in, share, follow, and spread the word. Register and vote, and legal marijuana will be coming soon. I cannot express to you how important it is when you take a marijuana post from Marijuana Policy Project or Responsible Ohio, and you put that on your personal feed, and you say to all your friends on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on Google Plus or on Twitter, you say, I stand up for marijuana reform and I'm not scared to say that. Okay? When you do that, that changes minds. We get 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, that changes the community. We get 100, it changes the city. You can see how it can be exponential to have just one person come out to their social network and say, I support marijuana reform. And you can use the marijuanadefensecouncil.com, the activist links, to find good memes and posters and facts and posts that you'd want to share your views. An example of some of the stuff that we put out from Green Fight, Dr. Sue Sisley, who's a friend of mine, is doing PTSD research for veterans. She's trying to get access to veterans at the Phoenix VA. They're blocking her. She got fired from her job at the University of Arizona, but she's got $2 million for a study that she's waiting to use to help veterans, and they're blocking her. So we put this up on Facebook and encourage people to share it, and we say, we have a YouTube video that goes along with it, but we want people to call this number and say, what are you doing, people? We got places like Dayton, Ohio, where they have a VA hospital that is prepared to do things like this, but can't because the law hasn't changed yet. We need to have the research done today. We need to have it start now, and the place where it can start in the VA process is in Phoenix. Also, we'd like you to call the Dayton School of Law and thank them for allowing us to have this symposium, and also support the marijuana reform course that we proposed for the spring here. So that hopefully we can have all the work that we've done thus far, we can catalog that into a marijuana handbook so that people that are interested in the criminal justice community and specifically marijuana reform can come out of law school with the tools and being prepared to fight the marijuana reform debate. Okay, the Marijuana Legalization Amendment, Responsible Ohio. It can change the definition of criminality concerning marijuana this year. That is amazing. To go from complete prohibition to a personal and medical use market and change the definition of criminality benefits the masses, and we must do that as a first step. We've talked about how Responsible Ohio is a limited commercial operation. It's a limited commercial market, meaning that there will be a restriction to the 10 growers who will begin the process. And that allows us to have a regulated and tested market and be an example, a democratic laboratory as compared to the open Wild West model in Colorado. The home grow and no penalty for simple possession means that 99% of the citizenry has all their rights vindicated in this initial sweeping step to change the definition of criminality. So join the fight. Like I said, get connected and then we'll have, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll have a Q&A. So that's all I got for now. Thank you. questions. I know that there's a couple of top questions in there that people have asked.
They actually made it to say we find out.
They're ready to go.
Like you're in the witness box.
Oh my God, what did you do wrong? What did you witness? Where am I sitting?
You're right in the middle.
I'm in the middle. I'm always in the middle. I'm in the middle of something.
Spent some of the younger days of my life in this exact position.
I'm in the jury.
Hey, you're in the jury box. He's in the witness box.
Hot seat, man. Oh, I've been testified in years.
Put the cops in the, on the side, right?
Mike, how you doing?
Good to see you. Doing?
Pretty good.
Good job.
Hey,
How do you work?
Mike here would like to join me as a speaker.
He's only been working on me for 5 years.
Okay?
Yeah, let me
I
know.
think you guys can make a nice little team.
That'd be a good tag team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How we got started.
Yeah. He's a good man. He's a good guy.
Okay, everyone. Now we're going to begin with the Q&A panel. Something has come up that Mr. James is going to have to leave rather quickly, but we're going to introduce everyone and then we're going to begin with the questions. So if you see him step out, it's because it is a tense time where we've got to get to Cleveland and handle some. He's got to get to Cleveland and handle some issues. For our panel today, we have a 20-year veteran of the Cincinnati Police Department, Mr. Howard Rahtz. And as you've already met before, Mr. Chris Stock, the principal drafter of the Marijuana Legalization Amendment, Ian James, the director of Responsible Ohio, Rob O'Brien from Miami Valley Normal and LEAP, and Mr. Mike Allen from MK Allen and Associates. He's a former prosecutor, former police officer. Some of the questions from the internet, and I think that Mr. James will let you have this first one, is the question is, What is the time frame? When is the first time that we're going to see retail operations opening up? How fast can we get these markets opening up if people support your position?
See how this goes, Chris? I'm still taking Chris's lines. So this is Chris's life right now. Because you know better than I do, because he is the lead scribe. But I want to say it's going to be September of 2016 is the first retail store get open. And you have to pass a local option in the May election. There's a May election that's designated in the amendment, and then you have another opportunity in August. You have 4 opportunities every year for local options, but September is the first, I think, likely opening of retail. Rob's Bakery will open.
In Blue Ash.
Okay, and this would probably be this is an open question. Is home growing seeds, starting kits, how is this process going to work for us to pay the $50 registration fee and get started? Do we get the small plants from a black market dealer, or do we get it from a marijuana manufacturing facility? How does that work?
There is no requirement that the home grower gets the seeds from a marijuana manufacturing facility. There is also, the amendment is also silent as to where those seeds could come from. But we left it open so that these folks that do the home grow can get the seeds from wherever they can get them from legally. I mean, I suppose in some instance you would say, well, you've got to get them from a legal source, so you need to get them from Colorado or Washington or California. But the amendment is aspirational. It sets up guardrails, right? But it doesn't get down into that nitty-gritty. I will say, as I said earlier, there is no requirement in the amendment that you get these seeds from the grow facilities.
I grew up in Athens, and I know that you don't have to go to Colorado to get marijuana seeds.
And just to follow up on that, I know that there are seed banks here in Ohio.
Okay.
There are a tremendous amount of seeds already in place.
I just have a question. Would that be an option to be able to get them from the facilities, or?
That's a good question.
I'm sure it would be, sure.
So to clarify your question, then the stores would have these seeds available?
No, my question was, would a person who was interested in home growing be able to obtain the seeds from potentially one of the 10 operations, whatever was closest to them, or, somehow channel that through a dispensary? Would that be possible?
Not a dispensary. A dispensary is medical only, but through the retail store, I could see a situation where you could buy seeds through a retail store or through the grow facility. Again, that's not something that's specifically addressed in the amendment, but I don't think there would be any problem with the MGCE facility selling seeds to the retailers who would then sell to the consumers.
Okay, this question has come up several times, and so I'll just shorten it up and paraphrase it. What are we going to do about the banking situation? What's our plan?
You want to take that?
We've actually been working with some banks. The bank issue is pretty simple. I think most people know what's going on with that. It's still Schedule I drug, federally prohibited. If you're a bank and you have FDIC insurance, and we've talked to a lot of banks, so the biggies out there, and they say, we cannot take your money because we're afraid the feds will come in and shut us down. But as soon as it's federally permitted, we're happy to take your money, and we'll take it right now like that. So some people look at that as fair weather friends. We look at that as just reality, and we've been working with some community banks and credit unions to deal with that, because if you can remove the FDIC insurance process and you look more towards like a Lloyd's of London coverage, then you can deal with those banks and that process, and we'll have a lot more news on that in the coming months.
Okay. Next, for the police officers and prosecutors. The question is, why should cops or the constabulary support a change like this? And I'll let you, Howard, start with.
I'd say first there's going to be some varying opinions on it. I always say whenever you got 3 cops in a room, you got about 20 opinions. So I think the majority of cops will not say it publicly right now, but I think it's going to be a great benefit to police departments because we're going to be out of the Mickey Mouse business and into fighting real crime. Mike?
You know what, I think Howard hit the nail right on the head. I made a list of 12 reasons why police officers and prosecutors should support legalization of marijuana. I tried to rank them. First one is exactly what Howard said. Marijuana enforcement takes valuable resources away from police departments and away from prosecutors' offices. When those resources could be directed in different manners, and I'm speaking specifically about heroin. I've been in the criminal justice system, it'll be 41 years next month, and it's a true epidemic. It really is. And the money that's spent and the resources that are used in enforcing marijuana laws, which frankly, what I'm seeing in Hamilton County at least, and I'm in court almost every day, they're pulling back on it. You're not seeing the enforcement that you used to see, because I think they can see what's coming. But the main reason I think, like only Howard could say, it takes it out of Mickey Mouse business. You can put your focus on more serious things like heroin. Like in Cincinnati, we've got a terrible problem with shootings and homicides. If you're not worried about writing weed tickets or busting grow houses, you can go ahead and concentrate on those things.
Compared to these two gentlemen's role, my role in law enforcement was microscopic, but I am associated with law enforcement against prohibition, and I have talked to hundreds of police officers, and on their one-on-one kind of opinion, they're like, this is a good thing. I've talked to police chiefs, they're giving me the thumbs up on this. So, you know, the rank and file is tired of this kind of engagement with the public. So you know, it will be very interesting to see the change in the resource allocation within the police departments.
Okay. We have a question. Who are the opposition groups? Who are we fighting against? We've identified the legislature and House Joint Resolution 4. We've seen a couple people that were from Citizens Against Responsible Ohio here today. And can you talk about the opposition groups?
Okay, I will. All right. The easy ones is the anti-drug groups. Okay, the Marcy Seidels, the Barry Haigs of the world. Those are actually easy to deal with. They have been in this business for 20, 30, 40 years. Okay, you know, they get government money to say this. Okay. The second group is a little bit different. They are what I call the pot anarchist. Okay, these are the people that, you know, we want free as a daisy, growing everywhere, no rules, no regulations, you know, not to demean the people from Yellow Springs or anything, but, sorry. But, they, you know, they're well-meaning, but they have no real concept of, you know, how things actually work. And a third group that has come to the forefront, these are the people who are in the business currently. They do not want legalization. They'll throw up all sorts of fabrications and false information. And they want to keep it illegal as it is because it interrupts their income stream.
Let me add one other quick thing here. I mean, I think you've got, as Howard mentioned, you've got legislators too, who because they can't get their hand on the money, tax money, where are they pissed? Yeah. Right? They're not happy about it. But I think to Rob's point, with the folks that are currently, you know, I know folks that are open air pharmacists. They operate in my neighborhood, right? They operate an open air pharmacy, and you know, a lot of them, it's about cash, not conscious. But some of them, they really do care. And frankly, you know, we've got to find a way to make sure people can transition from the shadows to the light. We did that under prohibition of alcohol, where people were able to go from being a bootlegger and going into being a tavern owner, a restaurant owner, convenience store, selling legal beer and booze, wine. But we've got to have that process, because there are some folks, and this happens in every other state, where folks go from an illegal grow operation in the basement, and then they start to grow or sell or in a legal licensed way, and we've got to do that, and that's a big part of what Responsible Ohio is doing.
With the expungement?
With the expungement, right, and I'll close on this, I have to hit the road, I'm getting pinged here to go. With Fresh Start Act, we're literally going to put before the Ohio General Assembly next year for 4 months the ability for people to clean up their record and deal with expungement and sentencing review. So that if you want to be able to be unshackled from your past indiscretion, some past crime, you should have the ability to do so. 73% of Ohio voters believe that it's imperative. It's a preacher's kid. So when I talk to faith leaders, it's one of the tenets of most religions is a second chance. That's what this is all about. It's giving people a second chance, the ability to move forward, care for themselves, care for their families, be a good citizen. When we continue to force people to have to go back to an illegal market and operate because that's the only way they can make money and care for themselves and their family, you're not making society better. You're hurting people. And I'm sorry I have to go, but thank you, Brice, for putting this together, and thank you all for attending today. And give these guys harder questions. Mike, thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, I'm going to throw one over to Mr. Allen over there. Could you give us some examples of how marijuana prohibition wasn't working, either when you were a prosecutor or as a judge?
How much time do you have? Plenty of examples. One of the things that just sticks in my craw, and we talked a little bit about it today, collateral consequences. Not just the $150 fine and court costs you got to pay for a weed ticket, but driver's license suspensions, which are mandatory. Thankfully, at least in Hamilton County, on drug paraphernalia and minor amounts of marijuana, most judges just ignore it. They just ignore it and don't do it. And Rob and I have had a number of conversations about it. Other collateral consequences, I've represented so many clients. I had this issue this morning in municipal court where young people in nursing school, cosmetology, any number of other professions, barbers, they can't have a marijuana conviction, even a minor misdemeanor. If they do, it gives them problems for their licensure. So we either have to hope the police officer doesn't show up, and if the police officer does show up, convince the prosecutor and the police officer to amend it to a disorderly conduct minor misdemeanor. I don't know that that's what the legislature intended when they enacted these things, but that's the practical consequences of it. Student loans. All the time I get young people with minor drug charges, marijuana charges, where if they are convicted, it affects their eligibility to get a student loan. Public housing. I think the city of Cincinnati actually has an ordinance that even if you're charged with a marijuana offense, not convicted, charged, it prohibits you or really anyone in your family from public housing. So the collateral consequences.
Mike, can you talk about the grandma effect with that public housing?
The what?
The grandma effect, where,
Oh yeah, if it's one person, let's just say grandma is the one that's on the lease, so to speak, for the public housing, and grandson who has a marijuana conviction moves in, grandma is screwed. I mean, they can take eviction action against her. And I haven't seen one for a while, but I understand that's currently happening. And it has happened. I think it's an unintended consequence, but it's a consequence nonetheless. One other thing I just want to mention quickly, because it's another thing that sticks in my craw. That's the issue of forfeitures, not only on marijuana cases, but on drug cases in general. I mean, if a person is within a mile of a marijuana offense or drug offense, and they happen to have cash on them, law enforcement officers can take that money and not even charge the person. And the threshold for them to be able to keep that money is so low. Congress needs to look at that on a federal level. The state legislature needs to look at that, I think, on a state level, and I think they are. Again, I think that's another unintended consequence. Great intentions, but it's worked a real injustice. And, I know a lot of drug cops, and they like that money, but they also know that it's unfair, but they're playing by the rules that are established.
I think an important point on that is that the asset forfeiture program undercuts due process in this country, puts the burden of proof on the person as opposed to the government. And it's just, we could talk for hours about the abuses.
It stands due process on its ear. I mean, it's so patently unconstitutional, and they have to change it.
All right, thank you, sir. The next question is for Mr. Rahtz. Thinking about the overall effect and marijuana as the backbone for the infrastructure for the drug industry, how does legalizing marijuana and bringing that out of the black market affect policing activities, and what do we do with drug dogs that are still sniffing for marijuana, and how does it affect the overall interaction and fight between the two parties, the police and the black market?
Well, the biggest thing it does, and I was going to mention this earlier, marijuana revenue, it's the cash cow for the cartels. It accounts for about 60% of their revenue. So I asked myself, how can we best put the hit on these folks? And if we take 60% of their revenue by moving it from the black market into the legal regulated economy, we've created a major hit on those folks. Ask yourself, of all the organizations you're involved in, how many of them could withstand the loss of 60% of their revenue and continue to operate as they have before? The question about drug dogs is more difficult, but I hear they make great pets.
All right. Some technical questions about the amendment. For the Marijuana Control Commission, there are professions dictated. Why not a drug expert or a pharmacist included in that group?
Well, I'm not sure a pharmacist would have the requisite level of understanding about the drug. I mean, a pharmacist has been prohibited from touching marijuana for whatever it is, 100 years or more. The idea for the different, there's 7 different positions is a simple one, and it's really an attempt to grab 7 distinct constituencies that legalization would hit. And so you don't have a pharmacist, but you have a physician. You don't have what was the other example? You don't have you have patient advocates. You have members of law enforcement. You've got somebody with expertise in the industry, that industry being marijuana industry. So, as we sort of contemplated what the makeup of this commission would be, we thought of those 7 sort of constituencies as being, hitting the vast majority of the issues and folks that would be affected by legalization.
Okay, let's talk about home grow operations. Will they have inspections? If so, how often and by who? And just to elaborate on this question, there are a lot of people in the social media and Twitter sphere and stuff that believe that the $50 home grow license means that the police no longer need a search warrant and they can come bust down your door anytime. And so if you could, Chris, if you could respond to how home grow inspections or regulation might work.
Well, first of all, it's silly to think that this amendment does in any way change the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. Okay, I mean, we have a long-established body of search and seizure law, and this little amendment here does nothing to upset that apple cart. So that's a silly notion. In terms of these sort of Gestapo-like banging down of doors and, we're going to come in here and do these inspections. Again, there's simply, I think folks have to understand that, if there is a home grow that's operating under the rules and regulations set forth by the commission, there's not going to be any reason whatsoever for a police presence who's stretched by time and resources and real offenses to gin up some sort of search warrant to come in and search your house if you've got a home grow. I can't envision a scenario where that happens, and I think that the commission would ensure that there are boundaries to prevent that from happening above and beyond, again, the Fourth Amendment. If that happens, you've got to hire Mike Allen, and you've got to go to court and say this is absolutely ridiculous. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I simply finish by saying that it's a fear born out of no reality.
Thank you. What effect, this is for whoever, what effect will Responsible Ohio's petition have on paraphernalia charges or laws? Either in the Fresh Act context of expunging paraphernalia, or will it change the laws concerning paraphernalia? How will that work?
Well, it's explicit. The Fresh Start Act is pretty explicit about paraphernalia charges. Let me back up since it's a two-step process. But you have in the amendment the legalization of possession of paraphernalia, okay? And then you have in the Fresh Start Act an opportunity for expungement of misdemeanor, minor misdemeanor. It's not, in many instances, it's an actual M1 or M2 for possession of paraphernalia. When you put those together, you have an opportunity to go into a court of your jurisdiction and apply for expungement. And again, this isn't just a sealing of the record, and I can explain the difference. There are a whole bunch of different offenses in Ohio where we seal records. And, that's about as good as a water bottle for protection, because pretty much anybody can look into these sealed records. It's sealed in name only, but let me tell you, pretty much every organization out there has the X-ray glasses. What expungement does, expungement is a step above, and there's only currently, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, there's currently one other offense in the Ohio Revised Code that allows for expungement, and that is a concealed carry offense.
Right.
And what we are doing with the Fresh Start Act is putting marijuana and accessory convictions on par with those concealed carry expungement rights. That's a big thing, and it's never been done in the state of Ohio before.
Chris is right about that, and here's the thing. When they say expungement, I generically refer to sealing a record as an expungement. Everybody does, but he's right. It's not a true expungement in that law enforcement can get to it through the Ohio Attorney General's database. If you're applying for a certain job, the Ohio Nursing Board is another one. Those boards and entities, if they want to, can get to that conviction. So it's not a true expungement.
Let me see if I can put into black and white that paraphernalia question. If marijuana is legal, okay, then if I'm walking around with a pipe that has marijuana residue on it, it's legal, correct?
Yeah.
If I'm walking around with a, say, a pipe with other residue, heroin residue or crack residue, then that is still illegal, correct?
Yes. You want me to get in my chair here?
No, yeah. I was just trying, because I've heard that same fear. The basics is marijuana is legal, so whatever little dust or burnt stuff that's in the paraphernalia, the pipe, whatever it may be, is still legal.
Correct.
Right.
These trace elements in the stuff identify, for people who don't know, it identifies what type of paraphernalia it is. So if you buy it from the store and you have a bong or whatever, if all they find in there is tobacco residue, it's not marijuana paraphernalia then it's tobacco paraphernalia. So that's the thing we're identifying. Mr. Rogers, you have a question?
Is that only going to be if you're not driving? You cannot have paraphernalia in the car, right?
No,
Or is that?
you could still have paraphernalia in the car
Okay, so, well, the state of Ohio gives out OBIs.
for having
So if you're
paraphernalia.
high and have paraphernalia in the car, are you going to be charged for that paraphernalia?
No, but you're going to be charged for an OVI. Yeah.
See, that's,
If you're OBI, not just based on the paraphernalia.
That's right.
Right.
If you're impaired, this amendment does nothing to change that. I mean, look, we don't want anyone out there driving impaired, whether marijuana is legal or unlawful. So the impairment issue, it's one that Rob and I have talked about on occasion, is one that's going to be left for the General Assembly. Our law enforcement types will speak to this. This is really the trickiest issue of legalization. It's the drug policy folks, the prohibitionist folks' biggest hit, which is everybody's going to be out driving stoned. It's going to be zombie apocalypse, right? I mean, we've all heard this. And the thing is, there's a germ of truth in the concern about impairment. But let me tell you, use, as we've seen in other states, doesn't go up materially after there's been legalization. And so what that suggests to us is that impairment is an issue whether it's legal or unlawful, right? So what we're saying is we're going to make this lawful, we're going to put controls around it, and we're going to have to tinker for a little bit with how we get the right impairment threshold down, which is why we didn't touch it in the amendment. That's something best left to the General Assembly and the Commission, but love to hear your takes on it.
Well, let me weigh in on that one because it's on my list. As someone who is in court every day, I can count on one hand, and I don't even need all my fingers, for the number of impairment cases I've seen. They're just not there. Cops are not citing for that because they're not trained to detect it. And the process of determining it through either a urine sample or a blood sample, they don't want to go through the time to do it. So that's a red herring. It truly is, because there are so few cases like that out there.
Thank you for using that term, red herring.
It is.
Because marijuana and driving, that's a whole subject and it can take another panel discussion on it itself, and it is a red herring.
Let's talk about for a minute the 4 flowering plants. Is that per person or per household? So in this example, so could a couple have 8 flowering plants, a husband and wife?
Well, I got the amendment right in front of me. I didn't know I was going to be quizzed on the technicals, but it is lawful for persons to have homegrown marijuana in an amount not to exceed 4 flowering plants, which suggests, based on statutory construction, that if you wanted to have 2 persons in a household, you could have 8 flowering plants, provided, however, that each person must first obtain a non-transferable license. So.
Okay, thank you. Earlier, just a question on market stabilization. There was a prediction that it could take place in 5 years. Has any state reached market stabilization yet?
That's maybe a tad inartful of a question. I suppose if I could rephrase it and answer a rephrased question, which is sort of unfair, but I'm okay.
Go ahead, I asked.
Has Colorado or Washington or Oregon, the states that we generally think of as being the legalization states, reached market stabilization? I think that with respect to Colorado, you're getting close. I think they're settling into a market rhythm. Washington is not, because Washington had a number of structural problems with both their amendment and their policies coming out of the gate. They had to essentially revamp their whole thing, so they've been put back.
And with respect to Oregon and DC and some of these other folks that just came online, there's been no stabilization.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on that. Over the course of the next 10 years or so, we intend that we'll probably see some shift towards federal intervention and how we're going to regulate the systems as once we meet that threshold of 25 states, the federal government's going to have to do something to intervene. So we're going to see a situation like where Washington had to go back and revamp their medical market shortly after coming online with recreational. There is no one that can predict the future, and there's so many moving parts that we're going to see lots of changes come through. Tommy, did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, I said one quick one. Assuming that, and I truly believe that, obviously, I'm hoping it passes and stuff, and I'm a criminal defense attorney as well. And my question is going forward, though, and kind of hitting on OBI and this type of stuff, is moving forward is there going to continue to be lobbying to make sure that, I mean, if I'm a legislation and it passes, my greatest way to suppress it is to come up with a bunch of laws to just crush it down where the only thing you can do is sit in your room and smoke weed, and that's it. Because, you know, right now, OBIs it's ridiculous. You can take a urine test now, and you smoked 5 days ago, they say you're impaired. Guaranteed. I deal with it all the time. Moving forward, though, and even like the workplace and everything like that, is there going to be continued lobbying to try to ensure those rights, and not just suppress it back down and says, yes, you're allowed to buy marijuana, but you got to stay at home?
I think the appropriate person to answer that, as I put on my other side of my collar here, NORML will continue to go after and be the voice for the consumer. We've already done that with the gun laws. There used to be a high misdemeanor, high felony to even own a firearm. That was one of our projects. The other one was about marijuana paraphernalia, now a non-arrestable offense.
Right.
We're trying to work on the driving license suspension. We got phase 1, then we're trying phase 2, but we foresee in the future that there is going to be a marijuana consumer advocacy continuing.
Do you see a lot of impaired driving cases in your jurisdiction, whatever it is?
Not too much, but my fear is nowadays came out with DRE. I don't know if you've heard that yet.
Yeah.
It's drug, yeah, and it's a bunch of junk science.
It's hocus pocus.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's just like the NHTSA crap, but you know, field sobriety test. But I haven't seen that much. You're right, because cops right now are kind of like, hey, I'm not going to do a urine test and follow all this stuff, refrigerate correctly, all this stuff. I just don't want my time and effort for a joint. I agree with that. I just wondering going forward, though, if it's legal now, is there going to be still that consumer protection for lobbying and making sure that it's not suppressed back down to just...
Under the amendment, the commission has the power to conduct studies, and one of the things that I am personally going to push, and within the normal sphere, is a study, an actual study on marijuana and driving. I've read, all the reports all over the world, so I kind of know the answers already, but I think it needs to be conducted here in a while, and I'm going to push forward on that.
That's awesome.
What we need to do in the relatively near future is come up with a technological equivalent of the breath analyzer. And currently we set a per se provision for alcohol, 0.08 BAC. Well, we need to, with the research backup, come up with the same sort of standard for THC, and that's your threshold, whether it's per se or presumptive. That could be determined.
Well, it just seems
it'd be nice to have the technology.
The BS monopoly crap to the amendment, trying to attach it to the amendment. It was just, what are they going to think of next to try to keep suppressing it down?
Yeah.
So.
I think me and Howard are scheduled for a future debate on that per se limits for marijuana. We can agree to disagree on that right now, because I know what driving does to marijuana.
All right. As we'll close out on that. I'll follow up with the last word on that question there for Tommy, is that Responsible Ohio is teaming up with groups to figure out how to do things like the Fresh Start Act. The Fresh Start Act is a commitment to the ongoing market and stuff like that. So not only will Normal and LEAP continue to do their things, but MarijuanaDefenseCouncil.com is going to continue to advance drug laws, not only in Ohio, but nationwide. And the Fresh Start Act and seemingly whatever it is that the community needs will be responded to by the Responsible Ohio petition.
And look, Tommy, let me speak to that. I've been silent, but to Brice's point, everybody in the industry is going to have an economic interest in making sure that there are, regulations and rules that don't unreasonably impact the industry. It's strangling in its crib. And there's a provision in the amendment that speaks to that says the commission and the legislature cannot enact rules and regulations that are unreasonably impracticable. And then that term is defined at the back of the amendment, which gives folks an opportunity to go to the courts and say, look, this rule or regulation is unreasonably impracticable, throw it out. And by the way, wouldn't be too hard for us to figure out how to get that in federal court and make our pitch there as opposed to in a state court.
We got some fresh questions.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a quick fire because we're gonna do about 5 more minutes and then we're gonna close up. Let's say the question is, what about local business and industrial business that have a drug policy in place for medicinal use? Short answer to that question is there's some protections for medical users in the workplace. Is that right or no?
Yeah, the short answer is I doubt that there is any policy in effect in Ohio that deals strictly with medical marijuana, right? Presumably it's a blanket ban on marijuana use or possession. If the employer wishes to retain that policy, the amendment actually specifically allows them to do so, with the one exception that if the employer has a prescription drug policy or a policy that targets drugs, that policy can't be more stringent as it relates to medical marijuana than as it relates to any other prescription drug. You don't want to, look, if you've got a policy at Smooth Construction that says, I don't want you on our cranes or on our jackhammers if you've been using Percocet, there's nothing that prevents the employer from having that same policy extend to medical marijuana.
Okay. If we can be very, very brief, Rob, talk about firearms and legalization. What are the challenges with legalization? Does a gun permit, does a medical marijuana recommendation mean that the ATF might come for your guns or something like that? Where do you see the future of marijuana and guns?
That's going to be a hot button issue, and we were very successful at the Bill Goodman knife and gun shows, and so that particular aspect of Ohio law is gone, but the federal law remains. It's one of the questions on the back of the form when you go to buy a firearm. So it's still there. It's going to be a pressing issue.
Okay. How will the manufacturer and retail establishments be picked? And will the applications be available before the November election?
It's going to be an open application process for all of that stuff, and it's one that the commission's going to have to set up, and it's in the amendment. It must set it up, I think, within 90 days of the effective date of the amendment.
We had a question, why do we need a permit for the home grow and when no permit or fee is required for home brew beer or wine?
Look, I mean, very simply, this remains a federally controlled Schedule I substance. It's what we're doing here is trying to balance all the interests, and so our judgment from a public policy standpoint was, a permit is no more onerous than what a person has to do to go get a rifle, a dog, a dental permit. I mean, there are all sorts of permits that we have out there that we as the government require folks to pull before they do or have something. This is no different.
Okay, well, thank you guys. We're going to wrap up the Q&A portion. The next thing that we're going to take a break, and then you're going to hear from our police and law enforcement people, and then we're going to see a couple photos from the signature gathering efforts and the report from the field, and that will conclude our day. So if you take a short break and then come back and meet with us, you're going to hear from the cops next. Thank you. How you been?
They will like the door.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But you know what? Up in Cuyahoga County,
I had heard and someone told me that your website and it's your website. Give a card. I'll get in touch because I'm sure there are a lot of these. You're bringing a lot of Thank you very much.
Cincinnati. Great. I really liked your speaking some. Yeah. Didn't know what to expect. Good stuff.
Well, we're just trying to get I had a road.
Study that, and there's a very strict sequence for those tests. Now there's very detailed instructions on that. It's supposed to be performed. So I will think that relatively near future we can come to some scientific based on what's in here. It's a crazy test.
My problem with that kind of thing is supposedly if the cannabinoid stay in your system.
Well, that's the issue is we shouldn't be measuring that. There should be setting threshold for THC. Yeah, apparently there's a testing. The old was lazy testing metabolites. This THC testing is feasible, but we just have to say where is it here, and how do you define that? Because that's not. That's everybody's tolerance, and actually, heavy drinkers, I've seen people go to 3 hours. They walk in the top of them.
That just amazes me.
Mr. Allen, and then you. Okay. Or you can stand up here.
Sure, okay.
Okay, I think most people are back. We got a few that escaped from our forum, and a few that are still on a short smoke break or bathroom break. But we're going to begin with Mr. Allen, who's going to talk to us about law enforcement and judges and prosecutor perspectives.
Thank you. I covered a lot of my points on the panel discussion, so I'll move pretty quickly. I kind of frame this as why police officers and prosecutors should be against prohibition and for legalization. And the main one, as I said before, so many resources are wasted by police departments, prosecutors' offices, judges, probation officers on marijuana enforcement. In Hamilton County or Southwest Ohio, where I do most of my practice, as I said before, you do see somewhat of a pulling back on that. I'm not seeing the big marijuana bust that I used to see. Still see a lot of weed tickets. I love police officers. It's where I came from. Most of the guys that came on with me are retired now, but still friends with a great many of them. But if a cop wants to screw with you, give them a weed ticket. And, that's what happens sometimes. And I'm not necessarily blaming the police officers for that. They do what they have to do. But even on those things, I'm seeing a pulling back on those. However, in the global world, if they did not have to pump all those resources into marijuana enforcement, there'd be a lot of money left over for something else. About 3 years ago, I had a client who had a big marijuana case in Butler County and Hamilton County. I was able to combine the two informally, at least for a plea deal. This guy ended up getting 4 years. That's the last big marijuana case that I've seen come through. I know they're coming through the system, but not in the numbers that they have before. But think about it, and somebody mentioned this earlier, and I kind of try to stay out of the political part of this, and it's a shame that we got to have, the politics of it, but it is what it is. But, when you think about it, and somebody mentioned this before, I don't know if it's written into the legislation we're talking about now, but if the money that is garnered from this can be channeled into heroin enforcement and treatment programs for heroin addicts, that's a good thing, because I'll tell you, in my practice, I see it all the time. Heroin that's public enemy number one, without question, not marijuana. And I think that's the big reason why law enforcement officers and prosecutors should be for this. The estimate is, and this is from Responsible Ohio, and I trust the numbers, about $120 million in law enforcement costs per year in law enforcement and criminal justice in enforcing these marijuana laws. That money can certainly be put to a better purpose. As I said before, the forfeitures, which are so patently unconstitutional and devoid of due process and unfair, those can be at least curtailed with respect to marijuana enforcement. The collateral consequences, and I think that might be the biggest part of this. The mandatory minimum 6-month suspension, which, as I said before, at least where I practice, most judges just frankly ignore for small amounts of marijuana, licenses that you try to get, nursing, cosmetology, barber, things like that, problems with student loans, not being able to get them if you have this minor misdemeanor marijuana conviction, public housing, we talked about the grandmother effect. It's just a situation, I think, now where the so-called war on drugs, we're not winning it. I don't think we've ever even been in first place. And with respect to marijuana, as Howard Rahtz said so eloquently, it's Mickey Mouse. Let's concentrate on the big stuff, the meth, the heroin, and things like that. And that's why I feel the police officers and prosecutors should back this. And I think, as Howard said too, you get 3 cops in a room, you'll get 30 opinions. But the guys that I talk to, both the retired guys and the active cops now, they can't say it publicly, and they can't say it within their departments. But I think when they go into that voting booth, they're gonna pull the lever for one of the proposals to legalize marijuana, because they don't like messing with it either. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Howard, who can give you some good analysis from the law enforcement end as well. Thank you for making me a part of this. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon. It's really weak. This is a big thing we're taking on here. We need a little bit of energy and passion. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right. We're doing better. One of the things that Brice didn't say earlier, I retired as a captain from the Cincinnati Police Department. At the time I retired, I was a commander of the Vice Squad, and I'm always happy to report as I look around, I don't recognize anybody. The second thing was, I came up here and I saw my name there on that witness box, and I get this surge of anxiety. I've spent some of the ugliest days of my life sitting in a booth like that, and I'm glad not to have to do that today. With the controversy that we all experienced outside a little bit earlier, the other thing I need to say is I have no financial interest in this. I'm not associated financially in any fashion with Responsible Ohio. My interest in this is different. The day after this is legalized, don't look for Howard Rahtz in line to buy any. Don't come to my house and expect to see me cooking marijuana brownies in the kitchen. It's not going to happen. My interest is doing something about the violence that's associated with the illegal market. And this proposal would be a giant hit on these cartels. And we throw that word around a little bit loosely when we talk about, some of the earlier discussion about cartels. Real cartels are something I've had a bit of experience with, and to use that word so loosely just takes away from the seriousness of the violence that's associated with real cartels. So we ought to stop that. When we legalize marijuana, we're taking away that cash cow from them. An estimated 60% of their revenue is now in the legal regulated market. The other thing we can do is we can also have, via this process, a huge impact on the heroin problem that's tearing the Midwest of this country apart. Heroin overdose deaths, opiate overdose deaths now outnumber auto accident deaths in the state of Ohio. Just this morning, in the Cincinnati Enquirer, St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Covington, Kentucky, reported a 68% increase in drug overdoses there compared to just last year. And last year they were saying it was the worst they'd ever seen. How do we do that? And the first thing we do, and I would argue, and I will argue once this thing is passed, that a significant portion of the money that goes to local, county, township, city governments needs to be earmarked for drug treatment. If today, in Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, you or a family member suffering from heroin addiction calls for help, the most likely outcome for you will be to be put on a waiting list. And what we've done when we do that is we push these folks back into the arms of the cartels. Treatment works. It's gotten kind of a bad rap because most of us know somebody who's been in drug treatment, and relapse is a part of the picture. And in the criminal justice system in particular, we only see the failures. We don't see the successes. When I was down at Vice, we were working on a prostitution, and we began to get a lot of complaints about a woman named Veronica Glass. That was her street name. And this woman was prostituting herself around the neighborhood to the extent that lots of people were complaining about it. We all knew who she was, had our guys go out and arrest her, and I basically forgot about it. A couple months later, I retired and began to volunteer for a program called Off the Streets, which is a program in Cincinnati helping women get out of street prostitution. So I was going down there once a week and working with these women on self-defense, which they surely need, and also some fitness. And I meet Veronica Glass. And here's this woman, 3 or 4 months now recovering, bright, warm, articulate, and to me, she is the bottom line. If she got better, I believe treatment can work for anybody with some effort. What we do when we provide treatment for people is we take away the best customers of the cartels. Addicted people are the ones who are their high volume folks coming into the illegal drug market. Every one of them we take into treatment, we're taking a high volume customer out of the arms of the cartel. Another thing that medical marijuana will accomplish, and we're all concerned about the overdose deaths due to heroin. And last fall, the Journal of the American Medical Association studied overdose deaths in medical marijuana states compared to those without medical marijuana states, and found a 25% fewer overdose deaths in those states where medical marijuana is available. And to me, that alone ought to be enough to push this thing forward. I want to thank Responsible Ohio for finally moving the needle on this issue. I've been working with the Ohio Rights Group and other groups speaking on this around the state, and believe me, there's days when I thought it was probably not going to happen. I believe that it is now going to happen, and these folks have made this happen, and I think we all need to work very hard to make sure that it becomes a reality, and I urge you all to work on that. Thank you so much for your attention, and let's get to work and get this thing done. We taking questions? Or?
Yeah, you can go ahead and, if you guys got questions for Howard, go ahead and
Not
answer.
so much of a question, but a comment on one of your things about the cartels. I was out in Seattle last summer visiting and talked to some of the new shop owners, or one of the new shop owners out there. He says they have gotten weekly threat calls to close their business or else in the cartel.
That's a statement about how big a threat legalized marijuana is to these folks.
Right.
It will kill them.
Where we can have high security at our facilities.
So I had a couple other thoughts. You also mentioned the calls for rehab and the waiting time. My thought on that is when someone is motivated to call, it's time sensitive. You can't put them off for 3 weeks because they're at a vulnerable point. They're calling for help. They're willing to try something different than what they've been trying, right?
You're exactly right.
So the timing is critical. You can't put them off for 3 weeks or 3 months.
At the moment these folks call, we need to grab on and hold to them with all we've got, because every day we've got them out of the illegal market. They're not out there buying drugs.
And the third thought that I had is your comment about maybe those of us that are willing, wanting to do this by the book and legally, perhaps the civilians could help, give tips on cartels and stuff like that. I mean, I could honestly see, a lot of us willingly supporting getting rid of the heroin.
Yep.
Because,
Yep.
I don't think anybody that I know is interested in that.
No. This guy asked a good question and I missed it.
Because I've been hearing about what he was talking about, cartels really are threatening shop owners, grow operations.
Oh, yeah.
Down on the West Coast and the southern region of the West Coast. Is moving all the way to all the other states. I've got friends in Michigan that have been threatened a lot. And I was asked by a lot of people, is there going to be higher security since Ohio's going to push for full throttle? Like, is there going to be a higher security for our operations, for our dispensaries, cafes, bakeries, whichever it is that we plan on? And is the tax money going to be going to schools?
It kind of goes back to the local area, with the local area who decide where they need funds. And then also, I know that for a dispensary, you have to have a security plan in place in order to obtain your license. So,
We would anticipate a robust security apparatus that would come about as this market increases, but probably Howard can back me up on this. The whole idea is that even if you have marijuana now, you don't want to call the cops. Okay, there's a lot of people that are like, I got marijuana in my pocket, whatever my problem is, I'm going to deal with it like it is. And when we bring back that 60% market share of marijuana into the legal market, people aren't scared to call the cops anymore because they got their 4 plants in their house. They aren't scared to have their ounce of marijuana in their car and then be able to flag down a police officer. So this makes the overall safety issues better, and some of those security questions and the threats about the cartels and stuff, they are balanced or counterbalanced by the idea that the relationship with the police for the majority of the community is repaired.
Is there going to be any type of program that the citizens can help with that?
I would encourage, and it would be marijuanadefensecouncil.com, would encourage people to participate in a networking, industry-based security plan sharing kind of thing.
And these are healing people, really, if you think about it. They're offering healing opportunities for people that are sick and need this. But they're going to be threatened by the black money that's going to happen. There's a way that even citizens can help.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a CCW now, and my interest is in medical marijuana because I can tell you, I mean, those are different things that they tell me I have. They only offer ones that possibly may be blind and this and that. If, per se, what are your thoughts, Howard, if I'm stopped and I've got my gun and I have my CCW permit and say I have resin in a pipe or something and I get myself registered to use, through my doctor, this medical marijuana. What are your thoughts how that's going to kind of come out?
That's a great question that came up earlier, and if you have a legitimate concealed carry permit and you have a legitimate paperwork related to medical marijuana, whatever that is, I don't see that there's a problem there.
Except for the Fed.
Well, that's a problem everywhere.
It's still a conflict. On the purchase transfer form for firearms, it's still a question on there. Fed makes no distinction between medical or anything else. And they do say illegal.
If you currently have a permit,
right,
shouldn't be a problem.
But don't they also have the word addict?
Well, illegal user.
Or addicted.
Or addicted.
Is that what it says? I don't know what it says.
Yeah, because I think I remember looking at that, and they had, you are addicted to a legal substance.
User of.
And the answer is, no, I'm not addicted to any illegal substance.
I think you've got a current permit, and you'll have the other permit. I think you're legally covered, but that's probably a question Brice would be better to.
Well, can we address it? Can we address it offline at the end of the presentation? The last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna show a short. I think it's like a 2-minute video from the field, and then we're gonna have some comments from Michelle about signature gathering efforts, and then we'll close up for the day. This is something sent from Bill Schmidt Jr. and Leanne Barbie from Facebook, and they were involved with the signature gathering efforts. So it's just some pictures from the last couple months in the field, and there is a kind of homemade rap song that goes along with it. So.
Here we go. Yo, one life, one love, one movement. 99 problems, one solution is proven. To do it, a closed mind society isn't doing. Generating a generation through waste and ruin. Put 2 and 2 together, win or whatever the case. It's for what you're fighting for to make a better place. To put a smile on a suffering child's face. We the people need cannabis legal in our state. So make no mistake, a lot of haters gonna hate cause they hate losing any and every debate. Wait, take a sec right quick, compare notes just to see where we are so far. Listen close, to overdose on cannabis, you have to smoke over 1,000 pounds in 15 minutes. Not a joke, prescription drugs kill more than both heroin and coke. Every year tobacco kills at least 5 million folks. And from alcohol, just 79,000 deaths. And that's just in the US, what a mess. Now take a guess, how many people die from burning one? The correct answer is none, now you're learning son. The advantage is cannabis saves lives. For those brave lives to stay alive, we gotta legalize. Don't be ashamed to sign your name on that dotted line, but you gotta do it right now before we out of time. Realize this mission isn't impossible, Ohio, but you know we gotta be responsible, Ohio. This mission isn't impossible, Ohio, but remember we gotta be responsible, Ohio. Columbus, legalize Ohio. Cleveland, legalize Ohio. Cincinnati, legalize Ohio. Toledo, legalize Ohio. Akron, legalize Ohio. Dayton, legalize Ohio. Canton, legalize Ohio. Youngstown, legalize Ohio.
All right. So if you guys, for those of you that are following on Facebook, you probably know Bill Schmidt Jr. and have seen his catalog of the efforts. If not, you can go to his page and find some of his shared posts on my page. All right, Michelle.
Okay, my name is Michelle, and I actually am the most successful petition signature collector in all of Responsible Ohio that was not paid. I was a volunteer collector, and I got a lot of signatures. This is kind of my hat because it kind of becomes famous. I am a clinical pharmacist. I'm also the mother of two. Married, and in my spare time, what little there is, I was able to collect so many signatures. So I wanted, and people have asked me also like how I've done this and everything. I brought this picture here. It's from 2 events where I was collecting signatures. Well, I guess it doesn't show all of it. How do I focus it? I'm technology challenged. But anyways, this was the Taste of Cincinnati, which was Memorial Day weekend. And we just had some helpers there. Rob was there with me. And then also Carly, you can see she's the one with the big pothead on her, on top of her head with a group of people that were there to sign. It was actually a really great event, and the reason I'm highlighting this one is because like at the end of it, we had these cops on the little segways rolling around, and they were saying, legalize, legalize, just in the middle of the street. There's, hundreds of people around, and they didn't care. And it was really great. And Rob is a really good hula hooper, which you probably wouldn't expect from a middle-aged man. But the next one I have is we were at the Yellow Spring Street Fair, and this is kind of, I can't get this to stay up here, but anyways, that's also why I have my hat on today, as my hat kind of becomes famous. Unfortunately, by me collecting signatures, I also I lost my job over it. I worked for the federal government, and I ran into my boss's boss. The very next day, I was written up. And I'd worked there for 3.5 years, and I had 1 write-up in 3.5 years. I received 3 within less than 30 days after being spotted collecting signatures. So anyways, that's also why my sunglasses will stay on and I will not be showing my face. This is another little outreach thing that we did. This was actually after we stopped collecting signatures. This is, we went to the Gay Pride, and it was just a little bit of fun because handing out stickers. We had 2 little 6-year-olds down there. One of them's Brice's daughter, one's mine, handing out signatures, and it's kind of funny. You'd see these little 6-year-old girls come up and hand people pot stickers, and they would just be baffled by it. And then also, Rob already showed you this picture, but that is me. And that's actually not all the packets I turned in. I turned in some as they were filled and I was going along. But that is at the end. And we had, I can't remember how many counties, but it was quite a few counties going. And I went to various different events. I went to farmers markets. I went to the Sugar Maple Festival. I went to Party in the Park in Cincinnati. The Old Canal Street downtown, we had a fundraising event there. I was there collecting signatures. First Friday events in Dayton, at Riverscape Park, collecting signatures. There's the Yellow Cab Art Building. They allowed me to collect signatures inside their events, so I want to give them a big shout out. So did One-Eyed Jacks. So did the Trolley Stop, and Tank's Bar and Grill did inadvertently. I was there eating breakfast one morning, and they had a small electrical fire in the back. So as soon as we evacuated the building, I went around and asked all the people that were in there, because I always had my petitions with me. I also went to the Festival of the Flowering Moon, the Yellow Spring Street Fair, Taste of Cincinnati, door to door a little bit, just with neighbors and stuff like that. Sometimes I was downtown at the Oregon District collecting signatures. I went to the Miamisburg Spring Fling, Taste of Miamisburg, the Dayton Gay Pride Parade, and then I also reached out to some of my Facebook friends that I knew were in support of the cause and private messaged them if they had any friends that they could direct my way. Let's make sure we get these people to sign, or if I could help direct them to one of the locations that was closer to the house if they were their house if they were further away from me. I don't know. It was very stressful and it was very fun all at the same time. A lot of times what I would hear from people while I was out collecting signatures, I actually wrote a lot of them down as questions just to kind of have them answered and already out here. One time I would hear about the, I can't remember all the questions I wrote down now, but sometimes people would say that they would argue with me that the weed that we're going to get here isn't going to be as good as it is in Colorado. And that just sounds ludicrous to me. The other thing I would get is, it's a cartel, and I would talk to them about that and various different things. And actually, if you read the amendment, the Marijuana Control Commission or whatever can decide to add more grow facilities. A lot of people overlook that. The things that I would bring to people is that it's no longer a reason for a cop to search your car. So if you are driving fine but get pulled over for speeding or rolling a stop sign or something along those lines, and he's not suspecting you of being intoxicated, if he smells weed in your car, he doesn't have the automatic right to search your vehicle. So I was telling people, and I don't know that all this is quite kosher with the lawyers over here, but if you're traveling with marijuana in your car, it's only legal to have an ounce. Well, if you have a pound in your trunk, they're not going to necessarily find that out because they can't just now search your car because they smell weed. So, take that, because I would have people that are like all upset that are in the black market, and I'm like, well, hey, now you can travel with your weed more safely. I mean, if you want to take an ounce at a time, you're completely legal. There's not going to be some special stamp that has to be on it for you to travel with it. And then also you hear the cartel argument about Responsible Ohio, and that's just, it's not true. I mean, these guys since I'm a clinical pharmacist, I kind of relate it back to drug companies and what we do. So if I come out and I'm Pfizer and I come out with a new antibiotic, we'll pick on Pfizer because they're kind of close in Indiana. I get a patent on it. My patent on it is 17 years. Did Responsible Ohio find weed? No, they didn't. It's been around. But they brought the money here for us to be able to get it on our ballot, to get all the signatures collected, and do what we need to do. So if you read the amendment, it says that for 4 years, they are the 10 facilities. After 4 years, the commission, who is appointed by the governor, not by any of the private interests, can decide to add more sites. They could decide to open it up and say every mom and pop can grow. And then the other interesting thing that I wanted to bring up that I've also talked to people about while I was out in the field was the 2015 versus the 2016 year. Everyone thinks that we're going to get a better turnout for voting on this if we waited for a presidential year. Well, that's not really true. If you look at, there has been stats done, and actually marijuana petitions and ballots get more voter turnout than presidential elections. But number two is, we're a purple state, like Ian was saying earlier. If marijuana gets voted on and is legalized in the state of Ohio, the coveted swing state for a presidential election, if it gets voted on and passed by a majority in 2015, I don't know what's going to happen in 2016. I can't predict it. But the presidential candidates, if they want our state, are probably going to have to address this issue. And if they address the issue and say in 2017 it gets changed from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5, or whatever they want to make it, or even if they could make it a legend drug, which is the drugs that are prescription, but not a controlled substance, so like your blood pressure, cholesterol pills. Then you can have interstate commerce. So yes, there may be only 10 people in Ohio that can grow, but nothing's going to stop you from going to Indiana and buying a plot of land and growing your stuff there and supplying your own dispensary back here, or whatever you want to do. Or if you don't even want to grow it and you want to buy it from Colorado because they have the better weed, you could do that. So there's bigger implications than just, you know, the end user or the people that want to grow or this and that. I think a lot of the bickering is kind of silly. And the other thing is, Rob made these shirts, and you kind of see it on the back of this picture here. This is his shirt, of course, but this, I had a similar one. And it says, that big square here on the back of it, it says, please ask to sign my petition to legalize marijuana. I had people chase me down because they would see me from behind and I would not know, you know, I'm like, hey, you want to sign? Hey, you want to sign? I'm going this way. And literally I've had, all of a sudden I'll hear this thunderous running and it's someone coming and chasing me down to do it. Another time I was going to go collect signatures. I was pumping gas. And I had a guy go, hey, do you really have a petition I can sign? And I was like, well, yeah, I do. And, you know, boom, pop the trunk. And then, but I also want to give a shout out to a few people because, like, Carla didn't collect signatures while she was being our pothead. She was just the one out there acting a fool and getting people to come in and sign. So Carla, Rob, Naya, Danielle, Scott, and someone I call Uncle Johnny. He tried to come help us one day, but he kind of has a little issue with GPS. And then also my husband Ian, not to be confused with the other Ian, my daughter Annika, my mom Belinda, who is also here, and a good friend of mine, Nikki, who all came and either helped support me by helping do crowd control while I collected the signatures, or, you know, were just funneling people into me, or watching the kids so that I could go out and collect signatures, or whatever. Does anybody have any questions? Sure.
Out of the, I don't know, thousands of people that we met, what was the general tone as far as their acceptance or their rejection? Can you put a number on that?
Well, I would say on average, I probably had 70 to 75% positive response. And some of these events my brother referred to as shooting fish in a barrel, and some of them not so much. The other thing I will highlight here, and I don't know how well you can see it, but Rob is right there, and he's getting a signature from a lady that's probably old enough to be my grandma. And, you know, so you can't pigeonhole. And it was very comical going out with my mom. She'd be like, hey, go ask that person. They'll sign. Look at that. They have a dreadlock. And they wouldn't. And so you can't pigeonhole people. I would ask anyone and everyone. And the person, I'd be like, well, I'm going to ask this person, but there's no way they're going to say yes. But I would still do it. And you would get a very enthusiastic response. So there is no longer is there a typical marijuana smoker. There isn't. I mean, there's so many different things, and I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but don't judge people. You know, I'm a mother of two, clinical pharmacist, live in Centerville, which I know is kind of sort of one of the snobbier neighborhoods here. And I was asking my landscapers, and they were like, is she messing with us? And it was very comical. So there is no typical user anymore. It has so many different uses, and we've only scratched the surface as far as studying it for medical purposes. I mean, I am interested in it, even though I work for one of the subsidies that's supposed to be wanting to keep it illegal. I'm interested in it for my mom and her medical conditions. I'm also interested in it for what we don't know that it can do. We have a whole system in our body, the cannabinoid receptor system, that needs further studying. We are relying on Europe and other countries to study this for us, and it's not working. So, and of course I'd like to smoke it myself, but I don't.
One one last thing. Besides, I verified this, that Michelle is the #1 signature gatherer that not big. The second thing is that she did not tell us is that there was a marijuana activist who virtually saved someone's life.
Oh, that was me.
Cincinnati Fountain Square, and that was Michelle.
Yeah, interestingly enough, there was a guy that experienced heat stroke, and he was an elderly African-American male, and you know, I was all decked out. Like, that's why I put on a little bit of this, but usually my shirt, I didn't have pants always, but sometimes I had leggings on that had pot leaves on all down them. But basically, I'm head to toe in weed, and we were at the Taste of Cincinnati, and my husband was with me that day, and this old man is like sitting down and he's not feeling very well, and some like his family members were kind of gathered around him, and he started seizing because he was having heat stroke. So I am trained in, you know, first responder kind of activities, and so I took care of the gentleman, and by the time that I had someone call 911 instantly as soon as I saw him start seizing, and by the time first responders were able to get all the way through the crowd at the Taste of Cincinnati and get to this gentleman, I had him sitting in a chair, talking, being able to answer my questions, drinking water, and eating a granola bar. Even though I didn't ask anyone to sign my petition any more than wearing, you know, the shirt that said, please ask to sign my petition, after all that, I had a couple people that were there, and they were like, oh, I'm still not signing your petition. And I was like, I didn't ask you to, and I didn't save this guy's life for you to. So that was kind of disheartening, and I was kind of put off by that. It took a little bit of the high down to a low from that, but other than that.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, well, we've kind of dwindled down to the many of these faces that we see here are activists that are regularly involved, and that's because we are the people that are out there affecting the community here in Dayton and in the region. And so I would encourage everybody to remember that we can all make a difference, and we can all be contributing to this fight. And so I thank everybody for coming today, and keep up the good work, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you.